4 of us left Oakhaven alive. 4 blades and nothing else. The bishop's map promised a pilgrim's road through the forest. A straight march to the Monastery of Vorgath the Veiled. The forest, it had other plans.
Welcome back to How to Abyss. In today's build, we're creating the Blighted Forest, the next chapter in this dark fantasy journey. I started by cutting sheets of exposed foam into rough organic shapes. These will form the foundation of the hills and rocky elevations. After trimming them down, I stacked and glued the pieces onto the base, building up height differences and a small cliff edge to give the terrain more variation. Once the glue had set, I used a hot carving tool to soften the shapes and create a more natural downward slope. After that, I went in with a knife and cut horizontal and diagonal lines into the cliff faces to suggest layered rocks. To break up the smooth foam texture, I pressed a rough stone into the surface and widened some of the crevices with the spatula. This helps terrain feel less artificial and more weathered. To clean up the outer edge of the diorama, I added a balsa wood border to hide the small gaps at the back. Then I sealed everything with a mixture of plaster, black paint and PVA glue to create a hard outer shell. I thickened that mixture to form a terrain paste, roughening the surface and filling small holes. Finally, I mixed plaster, glue and fine sand to create a gritty ground layer and spread it across the entire base. To add variation to the terrain, I applied rough sand along the cliff edges and covered the ground with a fine sand. Small rocks were placed mainly near the slopes to keep the terrain natural. Everything was sealed using isopropyl alcohol and watered down PVA glue. Once dry, I added dried sunflower roots to stimulate exposed tree roots, along with a small fallen branch for extra detail. The forest wouldn't feel complete without proper trees. To save time, I used some 3D printed pine trees that I designed myself. If you're interested, I sell them on my Mini Factory store. I'll leave a link in the description. I also built a fallen tree from balsa wood. After shaping it into a tapered trunk, I sanded it smooth. Using a needle sculpting tool, I carved random vertical lines into the wood to create bark texture. To create a natural break, I cut a small guiding line and snapped the trunk by hand, refining the damaged area afterwards. The branches were made from trimmed 3D printed pieces and and secured with super glue. I then airbrushed the tree using burnt umber as a base tone. With the base of the diorama complete, I primed the entire diorama black using the airbrush. Then I layered 2 brown tones over the terrain, brown sand and cavalry brown, to build depth in the ground texture. Now for the foliage of the pine trees. I applied PVA glue to the branches and sprinkled on some dead grass flocking. These will resemble smaller branches. Once dry, I added a second layer of PVA glue and then sprinkled on some dawn green flocking to create the needles of the tree. To secure them, I drilled holes into the base of each tree, inserted thick iron wire and anchored them into the terrain with super glue. Ground foliage was added in small patches using fine grass flocking, keeping the coverage sparse. Around the tree bases, I used Verlet earth texture to blend the transition into the terrain. I lightly misted the trees and grass with a deep green to darken the atmosphere. I also painted the Verlet earth texture using the same 2 brown tones I used for the ground. The fallen trunk and cliff edges received a touch of fine green flocking to stimulate moss. Small paper ferns were placed throughout the scene, followed by bushes made from growing ivy by Green Stuff World. As a final touch, I misted the entire diorama with a subtle dark blue to push the scene into the nighttime setting. But this will be done when I place every model into the diorama.
At the tree line we found her. The sorceress stepped from the shadows as if she had been watching our approach. She had not entered the village with us. She had circled wide, avoiding Oakhaven entirely. She claimed the corruption there was already too concentrated. that walking into it would have been suicide. 4 of us were proof enough. We did not argue. We entered the forest together. The air changed almost immediately, thick, damp, and unnaturally still. No birds, no insects. Even the trees seemed reluctant to move. Infection had not stopped at the cottages. It had spread outward. The ambush was sudden and precise. The giant heard it first. A crack of timber behind us. He turned just as the beast erupted from the bush. A moose once, now swollen, with growths, its antlers twisted into barbed bone. It didn't hesitate. It drove straight through him. The impact lifted him from the ground. One clean thrust. He fell. He did not rise. Even the wildlife had become a vessel for the rod. The forest no longer belonged to itself. Shapes moved between the trees. More infected, more wrong. We tightened our line. She stepped forward. There was no incantation, no spectacle. The air around us simply ignited. Light bent towards her hands. Heat folded inwards, and then it was over. The creatures burned where they stood. Not with wild flame, but with deliberate precision. When the smoke cleared, 4 of us remained. The sorcerers did not look tired. That troubled me more than the beast had. The monastery waits beyond these woods. If the village was merely a larder, then the forest is the warning, and we have yet to see the heart of it.